We are starting our conversation with Madame Jонест. She is a representative of the International Organization Reporters Without Borders, and we are very pleased to have her in Sofia during a very long, very short but very event-rich stay here in Bulgaria. Yesterday we were at your presentation and we spoke about the Sakharov Prize and the media situation in Europe, in the Balkans, and here in Bulgaria. So we are very pleased right now to be able to interview her in our video format. First of all, would you tell us very few words about yourself, your career as a journalist before becoming involved in an NGO that deals with freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and media freedoms in general?
The last 20-something years, I won't say too much how many, working both for radio stations or print newspapers, among them Libération, Le Monde, French newspapers that you might know. I lived both in Paris, Brussels, and New York City, where I covered for at least 11 years the United Nations and the United States news, politics, economics, and everything. And I did spend a year actually in Kosovo, in the Balkans, not too far from here, working for the UN.
When?
It was in '99. I did stay a year there, just after the NATO soldiers arrived. The UN, the first team, had to set up the civil administration, which was a first for UN. And I was in charge with other colleagues from BBC and other media by the UN to set up their UN radio station. And then just recently I had to be in Brussels for family reason, and I was approached by RSF for their 30th anniversary because they were planning to open an office in Brussels, and the contact was worked fine and nicely, and it made sense for me after so many years as a journalist. I kept on saying, you know, I'm tired of denouncing, I would love to act now, and that was a perfect timing for me. So I'm in charge now of this new Balkans.
Is this the main difference between being a journalist and being an NGO leader and NGO activists? Do you somehow regret stepping down of journalism, or?
I don't think you can step down. I think you remain a journalist all your life. It's a way of life. It's a way of seeing things. It's a way of interpreting and feeling also. I don't think when I get up in the morning, I'm still a journalist in my mind. But a journalist is also an activist, basically, by denouncing violation of human rights, because we all do cover. It's rare to meet a journalist who covers nice, happy issues, basically. So you're as a journalist, you're kind of activist in a way that you denounce things that shouldn't happen, and you want them to be known and told to the public. So that's an approach you have to keep in mind.
We started this interview with a small shot of your map of media freedoms in the world over there. Thanks to your conference yesterday, we have a new decoration in our office. By the way, Reporters Without Borders was created by 4 journalists. After so many years, what are the current dimensions of its work, of the organization? Is it much different than it used to be so many years ago when it was established?
It is obviously, well, in the content is the same. The mission is kind of changed. The main objective is still and will always be to defend the freedom of press, obviously. But it went more from, because of internet emergence in our life, and now the access to information for everyone in the world, except we have still to say that 1 web user out of 3 doesn't have free access to internet in the world, so this is something to be mentioned. We went from defending freedom of press, and we are still defending freedom of press, but more for today we make the point that it's to inform, because you can inform also as a blogger, informing. You can be a whistleblower. And
Yeah.
we hear many scandals around the world, the Vatican story, the Vatileaks.
Right now, yeah.
But you have many others, LuxLeaks in Netherlands. I mean, everything has to do now, comes out thanks to someone from the inside, an insider that is whistleblowing, if I can say.
Yeah.
So all these people are also have the right to be protected because they are informing basically the public. So this is one change, but obviously I think the new media, appearance in the spectrum of the media spectrum is clearly what changed, and the life of journalists to begin with. As a journalist before, I remember in New York, when I arrived in '94, I didn't have a mobile phone, didn't exist. I had a beeper. I was sending my pieces to my papers by fax. And I was working at the public library in New York City to get
check facts.
Yeah. So now obviously you just do a click and it's done, and it's at the same time this click can put you in touch with so many people, and we saw it during the Arab Spring.
Of course.
Internet became a tool of mobilization, tool of information, which is also a tool of propaganda and has been for a long time during wars.
Nowadays there are so many qualifications speaking about hybrid wars and so forth. Do you think that all this new technology in fact helped journalism, or in fact made it more biased, and in fact produced a media situation when almost everybody can produce content, publish that content, and at the same time you create smaller audiences which are more dedicated, to are much more like fans, like football fans, and so few are eligible, or so few are inclined to like precious journalism of the type of Le Monde of many decades ago, for example.
Well, I think first we need to see it positively, because it helps people communicate in countries where you have authoritarian regime preventing them from communicating. The problem is now that those regimes were smart enough to return internet against the users, and they do surveillance now, technological surveillance, which is very nasty in some places in the world. Iran is one of them, China, not to mention Saudi Arabia, where Raif Badawi, the blogger, is in jail now, and who got the Sakharov Prize recently. So it is positive in a way that it puts people in touch very easily. You just do a click and you can mobilize many people in favor of your cause. But indeed, we have to be very careful and cautious, and that's why actually Reporter Whistleblower created in 2001 a new media desk, and is today offering training in cyber security, because people, even in Bulgaria, actually can work in zones very sensitive, and their comments, their exchange on even email, or we don't know, all these kind of new media or social network can be controlled and read by people you don't really want them to read. Your sources are not protected so well. So now we have this layer of security and protection that needs to be really taught and well managed.
Are you afraid that the events of last week and the week before and all these tragic events around us will in fact somehow hamper media freedoms and restrict access to information and so forth? Because on one side everybody is eager to know everything, on the other side many people are ready to sacrifice media's freedom of speech and so forth in terms of security.
Well, this is first I need to pay tribute to two of the victims that were related to RSF. One worked for RSF as a graphist in 2013. She was a young woman just walking by a restaurant with her sister, and they both got killed. The other one was a young woman, daughter of a long-time member of our board. And this is a tragedy, obviously, not for the story of that young woman only, but for everyone and for people.
And you have our support and sympathy.
Yeah, it's just a global issue today, unfortunately. Would it hamper the freedom of press? Well, and restrict it, yes, in a way, not directly, but because the more we have these kind of attacks, the more we are at risk, the more governments, and rightly so, it's legitimate, it's good intention, it's to protect the nation. but the more you ethics laws protecting the nation, which are strongly, set up like strict measures of security, the more you tighten the security measures, the more you create laws for security, and the less you have space for freedom.
Breeding,
this is by definition. So freedom of press is one of the freedoms that might be affected, but we shouldn't see it so negatively. We have to, because, the way journalists report today about all these attacks, we're lucky that we have everyone following the issue, and the radical, Islamism is something that has been followed by journalists for a long time now.
Probably, of course, what is happening right now is affecting our attitudes and so forth, but looking back, let's say, to your report of 2014, or your last report, which are the most troubling cases of repressions against journalism globally in the last year or two?
Globally, you have the bad guys, always the same one, unfortunately. I just mentioned two of them, Iran and China, Saudi Arabia. The last one on the list is Eritrea. It's the 180th one. But without talking about the black zone, because I see the map there, there's the red and orange zone. Actually, Bulgaria, I don't want to point too much at it, but it's 106 on the list, and has been in the 100 for 2 years in a row. Many parts of Europe, even though they're doing, Bulgaria is the worst case of EU countries, but are not doing so well. Apart from the Nordic states of Europe, Norway, Finland, Netherlands, which have always been the good students, let's say, the good models, it's a bit global, unfortunately, and it has to do with or authoritarian regimes, or in the case of Europe, it's not so much authoritarian, it's just restricting, laws set up to once again protect the nation, and under the security pretext, we end up having a problem doing our job as a journalist.
So you mentioned, in fact, you somehow, as an experienced journalist, stole my question. I was just about to ask you about this place of Bulgaria being the last EU country being in the list. Of course, there are some other countries you mentioned, even the situation in Greece, even the situation in Italy, not to speak about Hungary and some other countries which have recent problems. But speaking about Bulgaria, you mentioned that this is your first visit to Bulgaria, but you have obviously monitors things in Bulgaria and have some information about it. What do you think of, especially after the discussions you had, after the questions posed even by students at Sofia University, right now where you came from, before this interview, do you have the impression that there is some peculiar Bulgarian specific in this situation, or this is maybe some bad practices which we inherited both from our previous communist times and maybe some not so good practices from the European Union as well after entering it? So if you can a bit elaborate on that.
There's clearly a pattern coming, at least unconsciously, indeed. You could see, I could feel yesterday the mistrust towards, for instance, union work, which comes from the communist era. It's clear that in the mind of the people, you can't trust too much those people, because they were the one acting as propaganda tool against them in the past. So maybe the new young generation who I met this morning at the university are the future, and I hope. I'm a bit troubled by it's kind of very sad to meet all these young people willing to do this job and saying clearly this is not possible in our country to do it objectively in a way that first financially there's a big issue.
Of course.
So, means that lack clearly here, and then the censorship is still present on an everyday basis, and there's also a lack of solidarity. I don't like to
this
much
is
that
the
word,
most
but clearly there's a because you have those pro-governmental media getting now angry and nasty at the other one who are not pro-governmental. You don't need to be party line to be, and you shouldn't.
Of course, we are trained to do
the most basic one we learn at school. But I'm a bit saddened and by to to see all these cases yesterday. Indeed, the questions were more about how can we do to change the way it is.
The environment and
the environment. Unfortunately, it goes back to, you know, I mean, elections. You choose your government. They don't get elected by corruption. I mean, it's not a corrupted system here in terms of election.
Of course.
I understand. So, and at the same time, as you said, Bulgaria is part of EU. Is an EU state member. It's been since a few years already now.
8 years already.
Yes, 8 years. So it should be complying
with certain standards,
rules and standards in the charter, and not to say, I mean, among all these rules and laws, there obviously the respect of freedom of press, but it's done in such a way that it's not that visible, it's not that flagrant. So maybe the way they do it, it's very vicious because it's you don't give money to this one, you don't allocate advertising to this media, you just censor the other one in another way, and the banking, the oversight commission that was created after the banking crisis is clearly doing a strong pressure, imposing a strong pressure on journalists by, you know, imposing fines or asking them to reveal their sources, which is not tolerable in a democracy, and Bulgaria is a democracy.
By all standards, having frequent elections, having standards of freedom. In fact, the freedom of speech, freedom of media especially, and the economic background to media functioning in Bulgaria is the most troubling element in the overall picture of human rights in Bulgaria. So, and I speak that as an academic who had been studying and witnessing that, even working with some human rights organization and so forth. And I know that this is a problem, the economic side, because people on the surface you have free media. You can publish anything you want on a blog, on Facebook or whatever. You can disseminate. On the other hand, you have the economic pressure of reality formats on TV. You have the so-called popular shows, all kinds of talk shows and whatever, which are following a general line, copy-pasting from other, not having real investigative journalism and so forth, which is unfortunately troubling. And you mentioned the EU, the Italian experience. For example, what happened in Italy, in fact, or have you monitored at your organization? What was the result of having all media joined into a corporation which is public radio and public television, these media regulations?
Well, first the way it's done and the way they're appointed is not exactly something we can support, because it's clearly political influence there that is deciding everything, because the people are appointed. I mean, the president of the media is appointed by the government directly. So, but that case precisely I didn't follow recently. I can just tell you that according to this NGO we follow a lot, Osegino per l'informazione, which is doing an amazing, courageous job, because most of them volunteering. They're reporting every day on the basis of the sources they have everywhere in Italy, violations of freedom of press, and it's really a very worrying report that they do every day on a daily basis. 12 journalists, just to mention that example, 12 Italian journalists are under police protection. This mafia, I mean, the environment today for a journalist in Italy is really risky, and it's not helping, obviously, investigation that are always done. It's particularly journalists working on investigation on corruption or, you know, any financial issues or business issues that involve politicians behind that are targeted. So this is really something that is worrisome and should be, you know.
Of course, and I think that from all you said yesterday and in this interview as well, for myself, I can highlight two themes from whatever I heard from you. First is from watching to action. And the second thing is solidarity. And especially in Bulgaria, this thing about solidarity, because it may be economic background, people who have, it's a kind of complacency, people who are, let's say, they're having good jobs, they are getting good salaries, and they make compromises in order to survive economically. Because many years, 20 years ago, when press freedom in Bulgaria flourished, there were plenty of opportunities. Nowadays, those young people you are mentioning in Sofia University, they didn't have so many opportunities. And they don't have the enthusiasm, they're too much involved and too much perplexed even by the environment, the lack of realization of your dreams and whatever. So in this sense, because we are almost concluding our talk, in order to be practical, how can Bulgarian journalists send information to Reporters Without Borders about, let's say, bad practices, about repressions of professional rights, about bad practices in Bulgaria and in vicinities here, even to journalists like that, Azeri journalist who was yesterday.
Yes.
That's a very interesting case, in fact.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. You know, we have a website.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
In 6 languages. So we are happy welcoming all reports. There's a few email addresses that they can be found there. For each zone, we work by geographical zone.
Of course, yeah.
EU and the Balkan zone would be the zone for them to address the report to, and my own person. I mean, I can welcome every comment, and hopefully I wouldn't receive too many of them, because this is not good news. The less we receive, the best it is. But
of course, but
to improve the situation, not to make it worse.
So thank you so much for this interview, and I hope that this will be some kind. Let's hope that there will be not a lot of cases to report to you, but still I think we can work together. We will keep in touch, and we will. It's important. Even Reporters Without Borders have many good practices, and we will be happy, because we are indeed a free media, which so far has no restriction in terms of censorships and so forth. So, and we are trying to do investigative reporting, journalism, not so much reporting, but we are following few cases. We are doing, for example, as one of our main topics is academic life in Bulgaria, freedom of academic life, academic freedoms and so forth. Also, the cultural heritage and some bad practices in terms of cultural heritage, destroying cultural heritage and so forth. So, and the court system in Bulgaria, the judicial system and so forth. So, we will be happy to collaborate with you.
It's important to inform the people.
Thank you so much, and you're always welcome.